Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the world long before GPS, maps, or even the faint idea of a road. You're standing barefoot in soft, ancient sand, the night sky stretching endlessly above you, filled with stars that look close enough to pluck from the dark. The air smells faintly of smoke and salt. Somewhere nearby, a small fire crackles beside a group of early humans who don't yet have cities or coins or kings, but they do have things to trade. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is right now.
Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge through a world before history had handwriting. The sand is cool beneath your feet, shifting with each slow step. Around you, the land hums with distant animal calls, hyenas perhaps, or something less identifiable. Somewhere ahead, faint torches glow, another small group, another campfire. Another group of people with something they think is worth sharing.
That's where the first trade begins, not with coins or contracts, but with curiosity. One person has a beautiful shell from the sea. Another has a sharp piece of obsidian that could cut through animal hide. They meet halfway, eyeing each other carefully, and swap. Just like that, a tiny bridge forms between two worlds. You could call it the first trade route, though it's little more than a dusty path between two circles of firelight.
You sit down by their fire for a moment, feeling the heat lick your face. The trade is simple, but the meaning is vast. You're watching the human mind expand, one exchange at a time. Before writing, before metal, before wheels, humans traded. Not just things, but trust. Archaeologists have actually found traces of this ancient economy. Obsidian blades from one mountain range showing up hundreds of miles away. Seashells buried in graves far from any coastline. Somehow, people were walking enormous distances, carrying the earliest forms of value across dangerous terrain just because they wanted what someone else had. Historians still argue whether this was mostly about survival, finding tools and food, or something deeper, something social, like showing off or building alliances. Maybe it was all of those things. You stretch your back and look out across the ancient plains. The stars overhead serve as your map. You can almost see faint trails between them, mirroring the paths worn into the earth below. Trade routes, both celestial and terrestrial. You follow one. You walk along a faint track through dry grass, following the prints of others. Maybe you pass herds of gazelle. Maybe you hear distant laughter. The world is so quiet that even your heartbeat feels loud. And somewhere in that stillness, you realize that trade is what first connected people who would otherwise have never met. That's the thing about early humans. They didn't just stay put. They wandered, explored, and carried stories with them. Each trade carried whispers of faraway lands, tales of mountains where the sun touches snow, or seas where the fish leap like silver coins. Those stories became as valuable as the goods themselves. Imagine sitting around a campfire and hearing that there's a place where the sand itself glitters like gold. You'd probably start whopping the next day, wouldn't you? Even if you knew you probably wouldn't survive the trip. One quirky tidbit, some of the earliest traded items weren't useful at all. They were pretty. Beads, shells, bits of ochre. Things that glittered, glowed, or looked interesting. Long before money, humans had an eye for bling. Some archaeologists call this the birth of symbolic value. The idea that something could be valuable not because of what it does, but because of what it means. You can almost picture one early trader standing proudly with a shiny shell around their neck, thinking, "Yeah, that's right, I walked 50 miles for this." Your footsteps carry you onward into a prehistoric landscape of grasslands, mountains, and rivers. You pause by a muddy bank where someone else once stopped long ago to fill a gourd with water. The faint impression of their heel still lingers, fossilized in the clay. You place your foot beside it, It fits surprisingly well. The connection is eerie and oddly comforting. This is how trade routes begin, not with ambition, but with repetition. One person walks a path, then another, then another. Soon, there's a trail. Over time, those trails become arteries of movement and memory. The first global network, if you can call it that, made of dirt and hope. You keep walking, the night cooler now. The moon glows silver on the horizon. Somewhere in the distance, you can hear the faint jangle of something. Stone beads against each other, or tools hanging from a leather strap. You're not alone out here. You never really are.
Historians still argue whether these early paths, sometimes called exchange trails, were maintained intentionally or just formed naturally by repetition. Some think small groups had designated meeting points, proto-markets where they'd gather seasonally. Others believe it was entirely informal, just chance encounters that accumulated into habit. The truth, as usual, is probably somewhere in between. Humans have always liked patterns, even if they pretend they don't.
You reach a small plateau where the wind is strong enough to make you squint. Below, a valley stretches wide, and faintly, you can see other fires glowing. Each one represents another story, another language, another way of seeing the world. The idea that something you own, an obsidian knife, a painted bead, a carved bone, might travel from one valley to the next, maybe all the way to that far-off horizon, feels strangely modern. In a way, you're witnessing the beginning of globalization, 100,000 years early.
You sit again, tracing the grooves in a piece of stone. Maybe it's been traded before. Maybe it came from a mountain you'll never see. You wonder about the first person who thought to trade something they made instead of something they found. That shift, from gathering to crafting, changes everything. It's the birth of specialization. You don't just find things anymore, you make things to exchange. You become a producer, not just a wanderer. One more curious fact before we leave this ancient landscape behind: some researchers think the very act of trading helped shape language itself. You need words to bargain after all. To say, "I'll give you 2 shells for that knife," or "meet me by the big rock when the moon is half full." Trade didn't just move goods, it moved grammar. You stand again, brushing sand off your hands. The first trade routes were short, just paths between nearby groups, but they laid the foundation for everything that followed: caravans, ships, markets, and digital transactions millennia later. When you buy something online today, a small part of that motion, the give and take, the curiosity, the trust, echoes back to these first exchanges between flickering fires. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of something sweet, maybe dried berries or honey. Another camp is nearby. You follow the smell, drawn not by hunger, but by habit. Because humans, it seems, have always been drawn toward connection. You smile to yourself, half amused, half awed. The first trade routes weren't paved with gold or guarded by soldiers. They were made of footprints, curiosity, and a stubborn need to share. And as you walk, the horizon begins to glow faintly with the coming dawn. The world is waking up. Civilization, though it doesn't know it yet, is already on the move. The sand beneath your feet gives way to something new: mud. You're standing at the edge of a wide, sluggish river, its surface reflecting a pink dawn. The air smells of wet reeds and old rain. You can hear insects humming, birds calling, and somewhere, a soft splash. Someone has just pushed off from shore. Out there, drifting through the mist, are the first boats humanity ever made. They aren't grand ships with sails or carved figureheads. They're bundles of reeds tied together with plant fiber, fragile-looking things that somehow float. You watch as 2 figures kneel aboard one, pushing away with long poles, their silhouettes dark against the rising sun. They're carrying something, small baskets of grain maybe, or fish, or lumps of shiny black obsidian. Whatever it is, it matters enough to risk the water. You wade a little closer,
your feet sinking into the soft mud, and feel that tug of awe. You're looking at one of the first moments when humans trusted something they built to carry them farther than their legs could. Historians still argue whether the earliest boats were invented along rivers like this, perhaps the Nile or the Tigris, or by people living on coastlines who learned to lash reeds together to chase fish offshore. Either way, the result is the same: humanity's first waterway of trade. The river moves lazily, but it's alive with motion. Along its banks, small clusters of huts made of mud and straw rise here and there, each one its own little world. Smoke curls up from cooking fires. You see a woman washing something shiny in the water, maybe a shell. A child points as your shadow ripples across the surface. The river has become a thread tying all these tiny worlds together. You find a narrow dugout canoe pulled up on shore. It's made from a single tree trunk, hollowed out by fire and scraped with stone tools. When you place a hand on it, you can feel the grooves, uneven and warm from the sun. Whoever carved this didn't just make a boat, they made a bridge between people. You push off, wobbling slightly as the canoe steadies. The water laps softly against the wood. For a moment, the current does all the work. You drift, watching reeds sway in the breeze, dragonflies buzzing close enough to touch. The surface glitters, and the world slows down. The sound of distant laughter reaches you from downstream. You let the current carry you toward it. Two other canoes are moored side by side, their owners trading, fish for grain, salt for animal hides. Their gestures are animated, even playful. Trade, you realize, has become not just about need, but about rhythm, habit, connection. One man lifts a jar from his boat and holds it up proudly. It's filled with honey, golden and thick. The woman he's trading with offers something wrapped in leaves, dried herbs perhaps, their scent sharp and sweet. You can almost smell the blend in the air. They nod, swap, smile. Another bridge is built, invisible but real. This is how river trade works: quiet, steady, dependable. The river doesn't care about distance. It carries everything equally: goods, gossip, and new ideas. A person living downstream might start wearing jewelry made from shells that came from hundreds of miles away, never knowing who first plucked them from the sea. You drift farther. On one bank, you see something carved into a rock face, a crude symbol, maybe a warning or a marker. Historians still argue whether such early carvings were territorial signs, travel guides, or something spiritual. But whatever they meant, they served a practical purpose: helping travelers find their way. The first maps weren't made on parchment, they were etched into the earth itself. The morning grows brighter. The river widens, splitting into smaller channels like fingers stretching through the landscape. You follow one that smells faintly of salt, and soon the air changes. The breeze picks up. The horizon seems to flatten. You're nearing the sea. The sight of open water is almost terrifying. The color shifts from brown to blue-green, shimmering like a living mirror. The reed boats here are sturdier, bound tighter, shaped to ride gentle waves. You watch a small group preparing to leave the shore, stacking baskets of goods, shells, dried fish, maybe even a few lumps of copper. Their eyes scan the horizon nervously. There are no compasses here, no maps, just instinct and the stars. One of them ties a charm around his wrist, a small piece of carved bone, smoothed by touch. You can tell it's a ritual, a way to say, if the sea takes me, at least I was brave enough to cross it. You smile softly. Some things never change. You sit for a while on the sandy shore, listening to the soft slap of water against wood. Every wave sounds like a heartbeat. You think about how these small boats changed everything. Once, people were bound to land. Now, they could cross boundaries drawn by nature. Rivers and seas that once separated people became highways that connected them. Researchers studying ancient Egyptian tomb art noticed depictions of reed boats so finely detailed that when recreated, they actually float. In 2019, a team of engineers built one to test it, and it worked perfectly. The same design used over 4,000 years ago still sails smoothly. Imagine inventing something so good that it's still seaworthy after 40 centuries. The sun climbs higher and the air grows hot. You paddle again, following the current out to where the river meets the sea. The transition is subtle. The water becomes clearer, the breeze cooler. You see fish darting below, flashes of silver like coins scattering through the depths. Somewhere out here, humans began to trade not just with their neighbors, but with the unknown. Historians still argue whether those first coastal voyages were accidents, fishermen blown off course, or intentional journeys toward new markets. But one thing is certain: once people learned to ride the wind and current, there was no going back. Every shore became a potential meeting place. You glance up at the sky. A group of seabirds wheel overhead, crying sharply. Below, the horizon curves endlessly, a reminder of how vast the world must have felt. Imagine pushing off from shore in a fragile reed boat, watching your home shrink to a speck, trusting only in stars you barely understand. You'd need courage, luck, and maybe a touch of madness. You pull your boat toward a small island, a sandbar really. On it lies evidence of earlier travelers, shards of pottery, fish bones, the remains of a fire. Someone camped here once. Maybe they stopped to rest between voyages. Maybe they got lost. You pick up a shard of pottery, its surface painted with faint red lines. The clay feels gritty, handmade. You turn it over in your palm. It once held something traded, carried, cherished. For a moment, you imagine the hum of ancient voices carried across the waves. Perhaps someone was singing, a lullaby for courage. Perhaps someone was laughing. Humans, it seems, have always found time to make noise, even in fear. You stay until evening. The tide creeps higher, licking at your toes. The water glows gold, then orange, then deep purple as the sun sets. Distant fires appear again along the coast, flickering like stars fallen to earth. Those lights mark the edges of early ports, tiny but vital. You realize something. While land routes were slow and dangerous, rivers and seas offered something different, a kind of peace. The river carried without tiring. The sea, for all its danger, connected far more than it divided. These water routes were humanity's first taste of speed, the first long-distance trade, the first true freedom of movement. As night falls, you lie back in your canoe, staring at the stars. They're brighter now, reflected in the calm water. You can almost trace constellations mirrored in the ripples. Celestial maps guiding travelers before maps existed. Somewhere in the hush between waves, you can hear a distant splash. Another boat, setting off under the same sky, following the same current you just followed. You close your eyes, letting the gentle motion rock you. The boat creaks softly, like it's humming a song only water knows. For a long moment, you feel part of something vast and ancient, an endless flow of movement and exchange that will one day grow into the Silk Road, the spice fleets, and the global shipping lanes humming beneath satellites and sea cables. But for now, it's just you, the stars, and the sound of water carrying stories from one shore to another. The river fades behind you as you step onto firmer ground again, this time packed earth marked by footprints and wheel ruts. The air smells metallic, smoky. Somewhere nearby, a hammer strikes metal with a dull clang. You follow the sound until you see the flicker of firelight, a small forge glowing in the dusk. Sparks dance upward, disappearing into the deep blue sky. A man bends over the flames, turning a chunk of glowing copper with a pair of tongs. Next to him sits a lump of dull gray tin, much rarer and harder to find. When the two metals meet, something alchemical happens. Bronze, harder than copper, sharper than stone, and beautiful in the way that only human invention can be. You watch the smith pour molten bronze into a rough mold shaped like an axe head. The glow fades, leaving behind something revolutionary. With this, wood can be cut faster, stone can be carved smoother, and battles, well, those can be fought longer. You probably won't survive one of those anytime soon, but for now, the air hums with progress, not peril. The Bronze Age has arrived, and with it, the first true global trade network. You start walking, following a cart creaking along a dusty road. On its wooden planks sit heavy sacks, copper ore from Cyprus, tin from the mountains of Anatolia, maybe even jade beads from faraway lands. Every step of the way, someone has carried, mined, smelted, or bargained for something. Each object is part of a massive, invisible web stretching across continents. Historians still argue whether it's right to call this a global system. The world wasn't connected in the way it is today, of course, but the scope was astonishing for its time. Artifacts from Afghanistan have been found in Mesopotamian cities. Egyptian scarabs turned up in Bronze Age Greece. The ancient world was smaller, but its curiosity was enormous. You stop by a small settlement where merchants have set up camp. Their tents form a rough circle, and in the center stands a fire. People are talking in a jumble of languages, gesturing, trading goods laid out on woven mats. There are metal ingots, pots of oil, baskets of grain, polished stones, and cloth dyed with colors so rich they seem almost unreal under the firelight. You crouch beside one trader who is carefully wrapping a lump of tin in leather. He catches your eye and grins, as if to say, "This little rock is worth more than a herd of goats." He's right. Tin is rare, so rare that its discovery and trade shaped entire economies. Without tin, there is no bronze. Without bronze, there is no age named after it. You can almost trace the map in your mind. Tin from Britain, copper from Cyprus, gold from Egypt, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan. Each resource drawn along invisible arteries of trade, pulsing with human ambition. These routes don't just move goods, they move culture, technology, and myth. One quirky tidbit, some scholars believe early traders carried small, pocket-sized clay tablets with markings, proto-receipts basically. Not written words yet, but simple symbols meaning 1 jar of oil, 3 goats, 5 pieces of metal. Imagine being one of the first people in history to argue over an invoice. You can almost hear the conversation. No, this says 5. That's a smudge. That's theft. Humanity has been inventing paperwork drama ever since. As night falls, the camp quiets. You lie back on the ground, the stars wheeling slowly overhead. Fires still burn here and there, flickering against the fabric of tents. The air smells like smoke, metal, and a faint sweetness. Someone nearby must be melting resin to seal a jar. You close your eyes for a moment, listening. The Bronze Age hums like a vast forge in the distance, each strike of hammer against metal echoing across nations. When you open your eyes again, you're walking through a different place entirely. You're in Ugarit, or maybe Byblos, or perhaps a harbor somewhere in the Levant, where the smell of the sea mingles with hot bronze. Ships are docked at wooden piers, their hulls loaded with amphorae and crates. Sailors call out to one another as they unload cargo. You step closer to one of the ships. Its planks are stitched together with rope, sealed with pitch. Inside, you see jars of olive oil, bars of copper, bundles of linen, and rolls of papyrus. Trade has become more than survival. It's industry. It's civilization's bloodstream. Historians still argue whether the people who ran these networks, like the fabled Canaanite and Minoan merchants, were independent traders or state-sponsored agents. Some think entire cities, like Ugarit, existed primarily as trading hubs, a kind of Bronze Age Singapore. Others think they were just well-placed villages that lucked into prosperity. Either way, these ports thrived on movement, exchange, and trust. You walk down the pier, brushing your hand along a stack of amphorae. The clay is warm from the sun, and faint traces of resin and wine cling to it. Somewhere, a sailor shouts about the wind changing, and ropes creak as sails are hoisted. The ship begins to drift out to sea, its cargo bound for places most people will never see. The breeze carries the smell of salt and adventure, and you can't help but think of how much courage it must have taken to sail into the unknown for the sake of trade. Not for conquest, not for glory, just to swap what you had for what someone else had. One of the merchants near you waves a bronze mirror in your direction. You catch your reflection in it, a little distorted, a little smoky, but there you are, part of the scene. It's funny to think that somewhere, thousands of years from now, someone might still be trading reflections. Shiny gadgets, screens, things made of glass and light instead of bronze. Different materials, same impulse. You step into a narrow street lined with workshops. The clang of metal fills the air. Craftsmen hammer, shape, and polish bronze into tools, jewelry, weapons. Sparks fly, briefly illuminating their faces. You notice a young apprentice watching his mentor work, his eyes wide. He doesn't know it yet, but he's part of something enormous, a chain that stretches backward and forward through time. You pass a stall selling strange trinkets, small bronze animals, a carved seal, beads of blue lapis lazuli that gleam like tiny fragments of the sky. You pick one up, roll it between your fingers. It's cold, impossibly smooth. The trader says something you don't understand, but you nod, hand over a token, maybe a shell, maybe a promise, and take it. The bead catches the light, glowing faintly. You slip it into your pocket, smiling. A souvenir from the first true global market. As you walk out of the city, the road opens again into empty countryside. Ahead, you see the faint outline of mountains. The road splits. One path leading toward Mesopotamia, another toward Anatolia. You follow the one that looks most worn, where countless travelers have gone before. The air cools as you climb higher. The sound of the forge fades, replaced by the whisper of wind through stone. You stop at the crest of a hill and look back. Below, you can see the shimmer of the sea, the dots of ships like fireflies. Beyond that, invisible to your eye, lie hundreds of other people following similar paths, driven by the same hope of connection. Bronze, tin, and the first global deal. This was humanity's first great experiment in cooperation. Empires would later rise and fall over these same routes, but the foundations were laid here in dust and sweat and shared purpose. The night deepens. You feel the weight of the small lapis bead in your pocket, smooth and cool against your hand. Somewhere, a caravan bell jingles faintly in the dark. You follow the sound, your steps blending with the ancient rhythm of trade, one that has never truly stopped. The metallic clatter of the Bronze Age fades behind you as the world shifts again, dustier, drier, quieter. The air thickens with heat, and the horizon wavers in the distance like liquid glass. You're standing at the edge of a desert, an expanse so wide and pale it seems to swallow the sky. The ground crunches beneath your sandals. Somewhere in the distance, you hear a faint jingle, a rhythm of bells, steady and distant, like wind chimes calling from another world. You squint, and there they are, a caravan. Dozens of camels, their shadows stretching long across the dunes, their gait slow and unhurried. Each animal carries bulky packs wrapped in woven cloth, bundles of salt, spices, cloth, maybe gold dust, maybe something far humbler like dates or skins. You can almost feel the heat rising from their backs. The smell of animal sweat and dry leather mingles with the sharp tang of desert wind. You step closer, the sand soft and shifting beneath you. The caravan leader raises a hand in greeting. His face is wrapped in a light cloth against the sun, leaving only his eyes visible. Eyes that have seen more sand than you've seen sunsets. He motions for you to join them, and you follow into step beside the procession. The camels grunt softly, their pace steady and almost hypnotic. This is the great heartbeat of desert trade, the arteries that carried life and wealth across the vast emptiness of Arabia, North Africa, and Central Asia. Long before highways or train tracks, these lines of footprints and hooves were civilization's connective tissue. The desert is both a wall and a bridge. To cross it is dangerous, yes. Heat, thirst, sandstorms, and the occasional bandit. But it also offers something irresistible, the promise of connection. You look up. The sun is merciless, the sky a hard blue, and yet this is where commerce thrives. People risk everything to move goods across this endless landscape because on the other side, someone is always waiting. Historians still argue whether the earliest camel caravans began in Arabia or North Africa. The evidence blurs across millennia, but one thing is certain. Once the camel was domesticated, everything changed. Unlike horses or donkeys, camels could survive for days without water, carry up to 500 pounds, and cross the kinds of distances that would kill lesser animals. You could almost say they were the trucks of the ancient world. Stubborn, reliable, occasionally cranky, and always spitting when annoyed. You trudge beside one of them now. It turns its long neck to look at you with an expression that's equal parts curiosity and judgment. You can practically hear it thinking, "You won't last a mile out here, human." You grin, wipe the sweat from your brow, and keep walking anyway. The caravan crests a dune, and below you lies a mirage come to life. A cluster of palm trees, a glimmer of water, a few tents, an oasis. You feel relief wash over you as the group descends toward it. The sound of trickling water, faint but real, feels like a song. You kneel by the pool, cupping your hands and drinking. The water tastes of minerals and life. Around you, camels kneel and groan, traders unload their packs, and children run between the tents. Here, trade is more than transaction, it's survival. The oasis is both marketplace and sanctuary. You see goods laid out on woven mats, ivory from the south, frankincense from Arabia, gold dust from West Africa, copper from the east. People speak in dozens of accents, some haggling fiercely, others laughing softly over cups of mint tea. One trader holds up a small pouch of powdered myrrh, explaining how it's used for perfume, medicine, even embalming. Another offers rock salt, simple, white, but priceless in lands where sweat is constant and water scarce. Salt and gold, side by side, traded ounce for ounce, their value shifting with geography. You can almost hear an ancient accountant somewhere trying to make sense of the exchange rates. One quirky tidbit, slabs of salt were once used as actual currency. Imagine paying for something with a block of what you'd later sprinkle on your dinner. Travelers even carved identifying marks into the slabs like an ancient barcode system. Somewhere out here, a misplaced salt bar might still be buried beneath the dunes, worth a fortune to no one but a curious archaeologist. You sit under the shade of a palm, chewing on a date that tastes like honey and dust. A storyteller nearby begins to speak, his voice calm and slow, carrying over the soft hum of the oasis. He talks about routes that stretch farther than imagination, north to the Mediterranean, west to the Atlantic, east to Persia. He speaks of merchants who travel for years, never seeing their homes again, all for the love of movement and trade. Historians still argue whether these long trans-desert routes were controlled by organized states or self-governing tribes. Some think there were intricate networks of trust, agreements between clans to protect traders in exchange for tolls or gifts. Others say it was looser, built on reputation. If your caravan was known for fairness and good faith, you'd find welcome along the route. If not, well, the desert had its own form of justice. You stretch your legs as the sun dips lower. The air cools, shadows lengthen, and the caravan begins to prepare for night travel. Daytime crossings are brutal, but at night, under the stars, the desert becomes strangely gentle. The heat lifts, the sand glows faintly silver under the moonlight, and the sky, oh, the sky is infinite. You look up and feel dizzy at the scale of it. The stars look close enough to brush with your fingertips. The caravan moves again, bells jingling softly. You walk in rhythm, the sound soothing. It's easy to lose track of time out here. Every dune looks like the last. Every horizon hides another. But the stars above act as maps. The traders navigate by constellations, some of which you might recognize. The Big Dipper, Orion, and others whose names have been lost to history. One man points upward, murmuring something about a bright star that guides his people. You nod, pretending to understand. But the gesture, the reverence, is universal. The same stars that guide them will one day guide sailors, explorers, and eventually astronauts. All travelers, all dreamers, all traders of one kind or another. You glance down at the footprints trailing behind you, already fading as the wind shifts. The desert is good at erasing, yet trade routes persist, reborn again and again through memory and motion. You realize that these paths, invisible though they may seem, are as permanent as the stars. Hours pass. The caravan stops at another camp, smaller this time. You help unload water skins, light a fire, and settle into the sand. Someone passes around a bowl of couscous, fragrant with herbs and spices. You eat quietly, watching the flames dance. The night hums with the soft breathing of camels, the crackle of firewood, and the murmur of voices telling stories of places you've never heard of. Cities made of gold, rivers that flow backward, seas that glow at night. You know most of it is exaggeration, but it doesn't matter. These tales are currency too. Every trader carries not just goods, but gossip, legends, and fragments of news. The desert isn't silent at all. It's alive with echoes of every conversation ever had between travelers who refuse to be still. You lie back, staring at the constellations again. The Milky Way arches overhead like a pale, shimmering road, a celestial mirror of the sand-bound one below. Somewhere, far to the east, caravans in Arabia follow the same pattern. To the west, across the Sahara, others are doing the same. These aren't separate routes, they're one connected web, pulsing with motion. You close your eyes, feeling the cool sand beneath you. Tomorrow, the caravan will rise before dawn and continue toward markets, cities, and coastlines where ships wait with new cargoes and new stories. But for now, the desert hums softly, a lullaby of sand, stars, and the endless rhythm of travel. And as you drift toward sleep beneath the same stars that have guided traders for millennia, you realize something simple and profound. The world has always been connected, not by roads or borders, but by the footsteps of those willing to cross the unknown. The dunes fade from gold to green as your journey drifts eastward. The sound of shifting sand gives way to the steady crunch of gravel underfoot, then to the rustle of wind through dry steppe grass. You've left the desert behind and entered a world that feels fuller, alive with motion, color, and scent. A faint perfume hangs in the air, hard to place at first. Sweet, resinous, a whisper of something exotic. Then you realize it's cinnamon, or maybe clove, carried from a market miles away. You stand now on one of the greatest arteries in human history, the Silk Road. The name suggests a single line stretching from China to Rome, but the truth is far more intricate. It's not one road, but a web, a vast network of trails, passes, and caravan routes that wind through mountains, deserts, and plains. From the shores of the Yellow Sea to the ports of the Mediterranean, these paths linked civilizations that never met, yet shaped one another profoundly. The morning is cool. Somewhere in the distance, a caravan bell rings. You begin walking. Your first stop is a bustling Chinese market at the eastern edge of the route. The air is alive with chatter, the clink of scales, and the rustle of fabric. Merchants lay out bolts of silk, so fine they shimmer like water. When the wind catches them, they ripple softly, almost breathing. You run your fingers along one, smooth, impossibly light, as if woven from mist. It's hard to believe something so delicate could reshape the world, yet it did. The secret of silk was China's most closely guarded treasure. Legend says anyone caught smuggling silkworm eggs or mulberry seeds faced death. And still, somehow, the knowledge slipped westward, first as rumor, then as reality. A merchant, old and cheerful, sees you admiring the fabric. He gestures for you to come closer. His voice is soft but animated as he explains the process. The mulberry trees, the careful tending of the worms, the boiling of cocoons, the hours of delicate unwinding. You imagine the shimmer of thousands of threads stretched across a loom, each one whispering centuries of craftsmanship. As the sun climbs higher, you leave the market and join a caravan heading west. The air grows dry again as you ascend into the highlands. Snow-capped mountains rise in the distance, the Pamirs, known to some as the roof of the world. The path is narrow, winding between cliffs where echoes of voices bounce off stone. Here, the trade isn't just in goods, but in survival. Travelers share warmth, food, and stories. The line of camels moves slowly, burdened with bales of silk, lacquerware, porcelain, and spices. Pepper, cassia, ginger, all bound for lands most of the traders will never see. By night, fires flicker in mountain camps. You sit beside one, wrapped in a cloak against the cold. Someone brews tea, bitter, fragrant, and passes it around. In the glow, you hear snatches of conversation in half a dozen languages. A Persian trader describes the cities of Samarkand and Bukhara, where domes shimmer blue beneath the sun. A man from India speaks of pepper so precious it's weighed grain by grain. A Roman merchant, stranded this far east, tells wide-eyed locals about marble temples and roads that run straight as arrows. You realize something extraordinary. These people, though strangers, understand each other perfectly, not through shared language, but through the grammar of trade. A gesture, a coin, a nod. Trust built one bargain at a time. Morning brings you into Central Asia's oases, green jewels in a sea of ochre. Towns like Merv, Samarkand, and Kashgar rise like mirages, fortified with walls, crowned with minarets, alive with color. In these cities, East and West truly meet. Spices from India, glass from Rome, gems from Persia, silk from China, all cross paths here. You could stand in the marketplace and see the entire known world passing before your eyes. You walk through one such market now. The air is thick with scents, sandalwood, myrrh, nutmeg, cardamom. Merchants shout prices, coins jingle. You pass a scribe writing contracts on papyrus and a monk bartering for ink. Nearby, a musician plucks a stringed instrument that sounds like a dream half remembered. There's something soothing about the rhythm of trade, buying, selling, packing, loading, and moving again. It's repetitive, like breathing. Each merchant, each traveler, each porter contributes to a great invisible motion. Goods travel farther than people ever could. You stop beside a spice seller. His stall is simple, just a wooden table covered with bowls of color. Deep reds of saffron, golden turmeric, black peppercorns shining like tiny beads. He offers you a pinch of powdered cinnamon to smell. It's sharp, sweet, and oddly comforting. From Ceylon, he says with pride, across the sea and over the mountains. You nod, thinking of the journey that little pile of spice has made. Boats, camels, hands, languages, all for flavor, for comfort, for luxury. You notice how people here don't think in borders. To them, the world is connected by routes, not nations. A man may live in Bactria, sell to a trader from India, who sells again to someone bound for Antioch. It's not politics, it's continuity. As the day fades, you walk toward the edge of the city, where the road continues west. The air grows cooler, filled with the scent of wood smoke and roasting meat. Somewhere, a caravan prepares to depart. You decide to follow it. For days, you travel through the rolling plains of Persia. The nights are warm, the stars sharp. Along the way, you pass caravans heading the opposite direction. Roman glass, Egyptian linen, and fine metalwork bound for the east. You marvel at the symmetry. While silks and spices flow west, gold and silver flow east. The balance sustains itself, delicate but enduring. There's a moment, one evening, when you stop by a ruined fortress, an old station where travelers once rested. The stones glow faintly in the fading light. You imagine how many footsteps have passed this way, thousands of lives overlapping in the same dust. You touch the wall and feel its warmth, as if the stones themselves remember. The Silk Road was never just about goods. It carried ideas too, religions, art, science. Buddhist monks once walked these same paths, carrying scrolls of scripture toward China. Later, Islamic scholars would carry mathematics and astronomy westward. Even music and stories traveled, melodies that crossed continents, tales that shifted shape with every retelling. You think of it like this: every step, every trade, every shared cup of tea was a thread. Woven together, they formed a fabric strong enough to hold civilizations. By the time you reach the edges of the Mediterranean world, you can sense how far the network has stretched. Silk glitters in Roman villas. Spices scent the kitchens of Alexandria and Antioch. A fragment of porcelain might sit on a merchant's desk in Athens, admired like a jewel. The people who use these things may not know where they came from, but somewhere deep down, they're connected to every step of the road. You stand now at a harbor, the far western end of the route. Ships rock gently in the blue water. Crates are loaded, ropes creak, gulls cry overhead. The scent of salt replaces the perfume of spice. You realize the road doesn't end here. It simply changes shape, flowing onto the sea. You watch as the sun sets, painting the sails gold. Somewhere on the other side of the world, another caravan is stirring to life. Bells jingling, dust rising, silk glimmering in the dawn. Trade never stops. It only sleeps between journeys. And as the first stars appear, you understand the quiet poetry of it all. That every thread of silk, every grain of spice, every whisper between travelers has bound the world tighter, gently, invisibly, since the very beginning. The land slips away behind you, replaced by a horizon that seems infinite. You're standing now on a weathered dock somewhere along the coast of present-day Oman, and the air tastes faintly of salt and sun-baked rope. The cries of gulls echo overhead as wooden ships creak and sway, preparing to ride the pulse of the Indian Ocean. You step aboard one, feeling the boards flex beneath your sandals, and for a moment, the world becomes a rhythm of waves and wood. The smell of the sea mixes with something unexpected: frankincense. Thick, sweet, and smoky, it clings to the planks and sailors' tunics alike. Bales of the stuff are stacked high on deck, each bundle worth its weight in silver. For millennia, this resin has been burned in temples and palaces from Egypt to India, perfuming the prayers of kings and commoners alike. The crew moves with easy coordination, tying knots, adjusting sails, checking cargo. They know what you don't yet, that the sea has seasons. Here, the monsoon winds rule everything. For half the year, they blow steadily from the southwest, pushing ships toward India. Then, almost magically, they reverse, carrying sailors home. Historians still argue whether early navigators truly understood the science of these winds or simply trusted the pattern passed down by generations of trial and error. Either way, the result was the same: predictable motion, like the heartbeat of the ocean itself. Your ship, a sturdy dhow with a stitched sail, slides away from the coast. The wind catches, the hull tilts gently, and soon the shoreline melts into the haze. You feel the deep calm that only comes once land disappears. Days pass in a rhythm of small tasks. You watch sailors mend nets, sing in languages you don't recognize, and steer by the stars. At night, the sea glows faintly with bioluminescence, tiny living sparks that turn every wave into a shimmer of green fire. You trail your hand through the water and leave a glittering path behind you. It feels like writing your name in light. Somewhere near the horizon lies the coast of India. You imagine the bustling ports of ancient Gujarat or Kerala, places like Muziris, which Roman traders once called the first emporium of India. The name alone sounds like a lullaby. Ships from Arabia, Persia, and even the Red Sea once anchored there, their hulls heavy with pearls, pepper, sandalwood, ivory, and cotton. The air must have been intoxicating. Smoke from cooking fires, salt, and the earthy sweetness of spice. When you finally arrive, that imagined scent greets you like an old friend. The harbor teems with life. Fishermen hauling nets, dock workers shouting prices, traders examining amphorae filled with olive oil or wine. You walk along the pier and realize that the people here know how to read ships like books. A glance at the rigging tells them the vessel's origin. A sniff of the cargo reveals its story. Inside the markets, everything moves in slow, deliberate rhythm. Merchants squat behind piles of black peppercorns that look like tiny beads of night. Cinnamon sticks lie coiled like sleeping snakes. You touch a bit of nutmeg and think about how far it's come, from islands thousands of miles away, passed from hand to hand. Each exchange a quiet act of faith that the sea will keep its promises. One trader shows you a bronze mirror from Alexandria, its surface dulled by salt. Another unwraps delicate Chinese silk, traded here long before the Silk Road met the Mediterranean. The Indian Ocean, you realize, has been its own Silk Road all along, older, wider, and somehow more fluid. You pause beside a potter turning clay. His wheel hums softly, the same sound you've heard in markets across continents. The vessels he makes are stamped with symbols that might mark guilds, ports, or perhaps families. Archaeologists still debate the meaning. It's strange, isn't it? We know the routes and the cargoes, but the people remain elusive, faces erased by centuries of tide and sun. You find yourself wandering inland for a few days, following a caravan road lined with palms. The scent of spice hangs in the still air. Along the way, you pass warehouses filled with cotton bales and sacks of rice waiting for the return winds. The merchants here understand patience. 6 months waiting for the monsoon to turn, 6 months to sail again. Life itself follows the rhythm of wind. When the season shifts, you return to the sea, joining another crew bound for East Africa. This time, the voyage feels different, calmer, more confident. The sailors laugh easily as they haul ropes, knowing the wind will soon be in their favor. The sea seems to know it too, sighing against the hull like an old friend. After weeks at sea, the coast of Africa rises on the horizon, lush and green, dotted with small towns where mangroves kiss the tide. You land at a port that smells of coconut and smoke, perhaps Kilwa or Mombasa. The language here is soft and musical, Swahili, born from centuries of trade and mingling. The people are tall, wrapped in bright fabrics, their marketplaces echoing with laughter. In the heart of town, you see ivory tusks stacked beside barrels of clove, and coral stones shaped into houses that glitter faintly in the sun. The merchants wear silver jewelry and drink sweet coffee from small cups. Somewhere, a craftsman carves an intricate wooden door. each swirl of pattern borrowed from Arabic calligraphy and Indian floral motifs. The result is uniquely coastal, uniquely human, a blend that could only exist where cultures meet. You sit by the water's edge, watching dhows come and go. Some bring gold from the African interior, others carry Persian ceramics or Chinese porcelain. The exchange feels eternal, unhurried, and strangely peaceful. You can almost hear the hum of history beneath the waves. A local storyteller sits nearby, recounting a tale to a small crowd. It's about a sailor who once followed a star southward and found an island where trees grew cinnamon bark. The story ends with the sailor's ship turning to stone, punishment, perhaps, for greed. The listeners nod thoughtfully, as if they know it's true. You think back to the markets of Arabia, to India's harbors, and now to this coast, all connected by invisible lines across the sea. The Indian Ocean doesn't just move goods, it moves memories. It's a mirror that reflects every civilization that touches it. As night falls, the stars emerge, dense, brilliant, uncountable. You recognize a few. Orion, bright and steady, the Southern Cross, just visible at the edge of the sky. Sailors use these stars like a map. You can see one at the stern now, tracing constellations with a calloused finger, murmuring their names like old friends. It occurs to you that this ocean has no true beginning or end. It's a loop, a pulse. Goods travel from Africa to Arabia, Arabia to India, India to China, and back again. Languages blend, gods change names, and yet the trade continues, steady as the tide. Before dawn, the sea grows glassy and pale. The air hums faintly, as if holding its breath. Somewhere beyond the horizon, another port is stirring awake, another set of sails catching the wind. You can almost hear it. The whisper of rope, the sigh of canvas, the soft splash of oars dipping into history. You lie back on the deck and let the ship rock you gently. The water below murmurs secrets it has carried for thousands of years, about merchants and monks, sailors and kings, all bound together by the same rhythm of wind and wave. And just as your eyes begin to close, you realize that trade isn't just about exchange, it's about trust. A belief that the winds will return, that distant ports will welcome you, that even across oceans, people are connected by need, curiosity, and the quiet hope of return. The sea hums softly beneath you, as if agreeing. The steady rhythm of the Indian Ocean fades, replaced by the sharper cries of gulls and the ring of hammers on stone. The smell of salt and spice lingers faintly on your clothes, but now there's something new in the air: olive oil, tar, and sun-warmed limestone. You've arrived in the Mediterranean, where the water gleams like a sheet of glass under the morning light, and history itself seems to hum beneath the waves. You step onto a bustling Greek harbor, perhaps Piraeus, the gateway to ancient Athens. Wooden piers stretch into the sea like fingers, and ships with square sails bob gently in the surf. Men shout as they haul amphorae from cargo holds, those tall, narrow jars filled with olive oil, wine, or grain. A few goats wander near the market, chewing lazily on rope ends, unbothered by the chaos. The harbor is alive with rhythm. Sailors call to each other. Merchants haggle in Greek, Phoenician, and Egyptian. And somewhere nearby, a fishmonger sings tunelessly about his morning catch. You pass rows of painted ships, their prows carved into the shapes of rams, dolphins, and winged gods. The air is thick with the smell of pitch and seaweed, and the faint sweetness of fruit fermenting in barrels. This is not just a port, it's a living conversation between worlds. From here, ships sail to Cyprus, Crete, Egypt, and the Black Sea, carrying everything from marble to honey to purple dye made from crushed snails. You can almost hear the history of every object whispering in your ear. I was shaped in Athens, sold in Corinth, and carried across the Aegean to feed a household in Alexandria. You walk uphill from the docks into the city itself. The streets are narrow, paved with uneven stones, and the air hums with life. Vendors sell olives and figs, philosophers debate near the agora, and somewhere a child laughs as he chases a chicken through the dust. It's both chaotic and comforting, the organized mess of daily life. In one stall, a potter displays amphorae stamped with the owl of Athens, proof of their city of origin. You pick one up. The clay is warm from the sun. The merchant grins and tells you that these jars are like passports, each mark a sign of civic pride and a guarantee of quality. You nod, imagining how many such stamps will one day be found in shipwrecks deep below the sea, silent witnesses to vanished trade. Down by the dock again, a large trireme, sleek and narrow, slides into view. Its 3 tiers of oars flash in rhythm, each stroke perfectly timed. It's a warship, not a merchant vessel, but even here, the line between trade and power blurs. Where goods flow, influence follows. Greek city-states learned long ago that protecting their sea lanes was as vital as philosophy or art. You leave Greece behind, sailing westward. The water darkens to indigo as the islands fall away. Soon, the coastline of Italy rises in the distance, and you arrive at the heart of another empire, Rome. The docks at Ostia are far grander, the traffic denser, and the language louder. Rome doesn't just trade, it absorbs. The first thing you notice is the smell. Wine, grain dust, and fish sauce, garum as the Romans call it. It's everywhere, poured over everything, and worth a fortune. Amphora stamped with the names of producers line the docks like an orderly forest of clay. You follow a cart being loaded with goods bound for the city: Egyptian glass, Syrian silk, Spanish olive oil. The cart rattles forward onto the most remarkable part of Rome's infrastructure: the roads. Straight, paved, and engineered with almost obsessive precision, they cut across the countryside like veins of stone. You walk alongside, feeling the heat of the stones under your sandals. The famous saying runs through your mind: all roads lead to Rome. But standing here, you realize the deeper truth: all roads also leave Rome. They lead outward, carrying not just armies and governors, but traders, travelers, letters, and gossip. Each milestone you pass feels like a heartbeat of empire. Historians still argue whether these roads were truly built for trade or simply for military dominance, but it hardly matters. Once laid, they became channels for everything that moved: goods, ideas, religions. The road doesn't care what travels it, only that something always does. At a roadside inn, you stop for bread and watered wine. The innkeeper complains that the last caravan from Gaul was delayed by flooding. You nod sympathetically, pretending you know what it's like to drive oxen through mud. Around you, traders swap news: a new coin issued in Antioch, a shipment of marble delayed in Corinth, a temple completed in Londinium. There's comfort in their chatter. It's proof that even across vast distances, the Mediterranean world is connected. The road is their lifeline, as steady as breath. By the time you reach Rome itself, the scale of the empire feels almost absurd. The markets stretch endlessly, filled with the bounty of the known world. You wander through stalls selling pepper from India, papyrus from Egypt, glass from Syria, and wool from Gaul. Somewhere, an old man sells dates imported from the Persian Gulf, swearing they're the sweetest in the city. You buy one. It is. The forum hums with motion. Senators in white togas stroll past bricklayers, soldiers, and slaves. You overhear a tax collector boasting about the revenue from the port of Alexandria. Without their grain, he says, Rome would starve. You imagine the fleet of grain ships crossing the sea, their sails fat with wind, each one carrying a city's worth of bread. Later, you climb the Palatine Hill and look down at the sprawl of marble roofs. Somewhere below, the Tiber glitters. From here, you can almost trace the invisible lines that connect the empire. Roads leading north to Gaul, east to Syria, south to Africa. The sun glints off distant tiles, and you think how all of this depends on movement, on trade routes that keep the empire fed and wealthy. You wander into a warehouse near the river, where workers are stacking amphorae filled with olive oil. The scent is rich and sharp, almost intoxicating. Each amphora bears a mark of origin: Baetica, Hispania, Libya. The workers move rhythmically, lifting, carrying, stacking, as though the motion itself is ancient and sacred. One of them tells you, half proud and half tired, that the oil will be poured into the lamps of the city. "We light the world," he says, with a grin that might be half serious. Outside, the streets buzz with carts and chatter. You pass a tavern where sailors drink and sing off-key. A man argues about the price of Egyptian linen. Another boasts of a shipment of silks from the mysterious East. You smile, realizing that the same silks once shimmered in your hands on the far side of Asia. The world, vast as it feels, is starting to fold in on itself. And somewhere amid the noise of the city, the scent of olive oil, tar, and wine blends into something oddly soothing. You recognize it, the smell of connection, of movement, of the countless invisible routes that tie civilizations together. You step away from the crowd and pause on a quiet stretch of road leading out of Rome. The paving stones gleam faintly in the moonlight, stretching straight to the horizon. For a moment, you imagine following them forever, across mountains, along coasts, through deserts, until they become the same roads you've walked all along. All routes, in the end, are part of one great circle. The Roman roads fade behind you like lines in the sand, and for a while there is only emptiness. The air grows dry and thin. The horizon shimmers. You are somewhere east now, past the lush Mediterranean coastlands, past the green hills and olive groves, entering a world of dunes, stone, and silence. The desert begins not with a sudden border, but with a whisper. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of dust and distant myrrh. The ground turns golden. The sun, once a gentle companion, now blazes like a forge in the sky. You pull your cloak tighter across your face and squint at the distant movement. Shapes undulating slowly through the heat haze. Camels. A caravan approaches, long and patient, each animal swaying like a ship upon an invisible sea. Their footsteps are soft, almost soundless, yet they carry the weight of continents. Wooden bells hang from their necks, clinking gently in rhythm. The traders walk alongside them, wrapped in loose robes, their faces hidden behind cloth to keep out the wind and grit. As they draw near, you see the goods lashed to each saddle: bundles of spices, bolts of silk, baskets of dried fruit, jars sealed with wax. The leader, a broad-shouldered man with eyes dark as polished amber, greets you with a nod. "We follow the wind," he says simply, "and the wind follows gold." You fall into step beside them. The caravan moves slowly but steadily, each footstep measured and sure. They travel not by roads but by memory, by stars, dunes, and stories. The guide points ahead to a faint line of rocky hills. That way, he says, is Palmyra, the queen of the desert. The journey there takes days. The desert is not empty. It hums with quiet life if you learn to listen. Small lizards dart across the sand, hawks circle high overhead, and the wind itself becomes a companion, whispering through the dunes. At night, the world cools and expands. The stars spill across the sky, countless and bright, and the air smells faintly of smoke and cardamom from the campfires. Around the fire, the traders talk softly. One speaks of incense caravans in Arabia, where frankincense trees cling to the dry hills. Another tells of the Silk Road far to the east, where Chinese silk and Indian spices move through mountains and deserts, bound eventually for Rome. Each man's story is a link in a chain that stretches from the Pacific to the Mediterranean. You listen, half dreaming, as the crackle of the fire mingles with the creak of leather and the distant sigh of shifting sand. The night feels endless. You drift to sleep with the faint taste of spice on your tongue and the murmured prayer of a camel driver in your ear.
When dawn comes, it is sudden, a blaze of gold and white. The caravan rises like a waking beast. Tents are folded, ropes coiled, animals loaded. The rhythm resumes. By noon, you reach the outskirts of Palmyra. At first, it looks like a mirage, a shimmer of columns and arches floating above the sand. But as you approach, the mirage solidifies into stone. Palmyra is real and more beautiful than rumor. It stands like an oasis of marble amid the wilderness, its streets lined with temples, markets, and fountains.
Here, the desert meets the world. Greek merchants bargain with Parthian nobles. Roman coins clink beside Persian gems. The air smells of saffron, cinnamon, and sweet oil. Women in long veils carry baskets of dates, and the sound of foreign tongues, Aramaic, Greek, Latin, mingles in the sunlight. You follow the traders into a shaded courtyard where scribes sit at low tables writing contracts on parchment. The leader of your caravan signs one carefully, sealing it with wax. Palmyra, he says, smiling, is where the world pauses to take a breath. He's right. The city feels like a resting place between continents, a point where East and West shake hands. Silk from China, spices from India, pearls from the Gulf, glass from Rome, all flow through this desert port. You wander among the columns of the Temple of Bel, where incense curls toward the sky, and think of all the journeys that end and begin here. In the marketplace, you buy a handful of dried figs and sit beneath a palm tree to rest. The shade is cool, the fruit sweet. Around you, the murmur of trade continues. The clink of coins, the creak of pack saddles, the bark of a merchant calling out his wares. But soon, the caravan must move again. Palmyra is a stop, not a destination. You mount one of the camels, awkwardly, with laughter from the others, and the slow march resumes eastward. The route ahead leads to Dura Europos, then beyond, toward the Persian frontier. The landscape shifts again. The sand gives way to dry plains scattered with scrub. You pass ruined watchtowers and wells ringed with stone. These are lifelines of the caravan routes, each one a place of refuge and memory. Some are guarded by soldiers, others by nothing but silence. At night, as the wind dies, you hear the faint sound of flutes from another camp nearby. Music drifts across the darkness like smoke. It sounds lonely and eternal, a melody made for travelers who never stay long enough to see the same sunrise twice. The next morning, a dust storm catches you. The sky turns copper, the horizon vanishes, and the air itself becomes a storm of tiny, stinging knives. The camels kneel, groaning softly. The traders huddle close, faces covered, waiting for it to pass. The world shrinks to the sound of wind and your own heartbeat. When it clears, everything is changed. The dunes have moved. The old path is gone. The leader smiles grimly. The desert, he says, is alive. You do not cross it. It allows you to pass. You travel for several more days until the scent of water reaches you on the wind. Soon, an oasis appears, a circle of green palms and a pool reflecting the sky. The camels quicken their pace, almost trotting. The air feels alive again. At the water's edge, you see date palms heavy with fruit, and the reflection of travelers washing away dust and fatigue. The oasis hums with quiet joy. For a few hours, the world softens. Laughter, splashing water, the smell of wet sand. Someone brews tea sweetened with honey and mint. The steam rises in thin ribbons, curling like dreams into the air. That evening, the traders spread their wares on woven mats, silk that glows like captured moonlight, carved ivory, nuggets of myrrh resin, lapis lazuli from far-off mountains. You touch each item gently, realizing that they've traveled thousands of miles on the backs of camels through wind, storm, and starlight. A younger trader sits beside you, polishing a copper coin from Rome. "I've never seen the sea," he says wistfully, "but I've sold silk to men who have." His smile is small but content. "That's enough for me." You nod, understanding. Every link in this long, silent chain has its own kind of wonder. When you finally reach the Persian border, the desert gives way to gardens and canals. The land grows lush again. Fields of barley, clusters of pomegranates, willows leaning over the water. It feels like a rebirth after so much emptiness. You cross a stone bridge into a city, perhaps Ctesiphon, capital of the Parthian Empire. Its great arch towers above the river, and the air smells of smoke, incense, and perfume. Here, too, the markets overflow with life. Traders from India, Arabia, and Byzantium crowd the streets. The sound of foreign tongues returns, richer and more complex than ever. You realize that you've crossed not just a desert, but a world of invisible exchange, where goods are only the surface of something deeper. Every jar of spice, every roll of silk, every carved gem carries stories. They pass from hand to hand like whispers, carrying pieces of one civilization into another. That night, as you rest beside the Tigris River, you watch lanterns float upon the current, their reflections wavering like stars on the water. Somewhere in the distance, a caravan bell rings faintly, another train of camels setting out into the darkness. You imagine them disappearing into the desert, following the same wind, the same constellations. The thought is strangely soothing. In a world so vast, so filled with emptiness, the steady rhythm of travel becomes a kind of heartbeat. The wind stirs again, soft and dry, brushing against your face like the whisper of sand. You close your eyes. The sound of bells fades into silence, and the desert swallows you in its timeless calm. The wind shifts again, warmer now, heavy with dust and the faint scent of salt. You're far from Palmyra and Persia. The horizon stretches wide and flat, gold bleeding into pale blue. This is not the desert of Arabia anymore. This is the Sahara, an ocean of sand larger than all of Europe, and for centuries it has pulsed with its own hidden rhythm of trade. You squint against the glare. The dunes roll endlessly like frozen waves. Somewhere beyond them lies Timbuktu, the great city of learning and gold. Between you and it, there is only sand, silence, and a slow procession of camels swaying like ships caught on an invisible tide. The caravan you've joined moves carefully, following a path older than memory. Each trader wears a veil against the wind, eyes dark and steady beneath the cloth. Their robes are blue, the deep indigo of the Tuareg people, desert navigators whose knowledge of the dunes is so complete that even modern GPS feels clumsy by comparison. You trudge alongside them, feet sinking softly into the fine powder. The sun burns high overhead, and you wonder, not for the first time, how anything can survive here, much less thrive. But trade, it seems, finds a way even in silence. The camels carry blocks of salt, massive, rectangular slabs cut from mines far to the north, each one wrapped in woven reed mats. They glint faintly under the sun, pale as bone. You wouldn't think salt could be worth its weight in gold, but here it is. In the medieval Sahel, salt is life, preserving food, flavoring meals, keeping people alive under the punishing heat. And gold? That travels the other way, from the forested lands of West Africa, downriver from Ghana and Mali across hundreds of miles of savanna. Gold dust packed into gourds, hidden beneath grain sacks, sewn into clothes. The salt goes south, the gold goes north. The exchange feeds empires. As the day stretches, heat ripples in the distance. The air itself seems to tremble. You can barely tell where the earth ends and the sky begins. Every sound feels muted, as though the desert swallows noise before it can echo. When dusk finally comes, it feels like mercy. The sky bleeds orange and violet. The traders form a ring for the night, staking camels in a loose circle. Fires spark to life, tiny constellations of flame. Someone begins to hum, a low, rhythmic chant that rises and falls with the crackle of wood. You sit with them, sipping tea that tastes faintly of mint and smoke. A man beside you grins through his veil. "We call it the Song of the Sahara," he says, tapping a small drum. Every caravan hums its own tune. The music is slow, hypnotic. It fits the rhythm of travel, the sway of camels, the long breaths between oases. A fact floats through your sleepy mind. The salt mines of Tagaza, once one of the world's most important sources of salt, were so valuable that entire towns were built of salt blocks. Even the walls of houses, the mosques, the graves, salt everywhere. Traders risked their lives to reach them. Some didn't return. You stare at the dunes glowing faintly under the moonlight and think, this is what connects worlds. Empires rise and fall, but these caravans continue, like threads sewing the edges of civilization together. By morning, the temperature drops suddenly. It's strange to feel cold in the Sahara, but here it happens fast. The sun hasn't yet burned the night away, and a thin mist clings to the dunes. The camels rise, groaning softly, and the caravan moves on. You pass a dried wadi, a riverbed that hasn't seen water in years. Bones lie half buried in the sand, camel skulls bleached white. Someone mutters a prayer as you step over them. "The desert remembers everything," one trader says quietly. Hours later, the dunes flatten, and you see movement ahead. Clusters of dark dots shimmering in the heat. At first, you think it's another caravan, but soon the air clears and you see palm trees, an oasis. The arrival feels like reaching another planet. The green is shocking after so much gold and gray. Water glitters between the trees, ringed by reeds. The traders rush forward to fill water skins and wash their faces. The camels kneel, snorting happily. For a few hours, there is laughter, splashing, and the soft rustle of wind through leaves. You lie beneath a palm, watching the light ripple across the pool. For the first time in days, you feel clean. It's here, in this fragile pocket of green, that you meet a storyteller. An old man with eyes like dark glass and a voice that seems to vibrate with the desert itself. He tells you about Sundiata Keita, the Lion King who founded the Mali Empire, and about Mansa Musa, his descendant, the wealthiest man in recorded history. You've probably heard the story before, about the pilgrimage to Mecca, the caravans so large they made Cairo's gold market collapse for years. But hearing it here, in the desert night, with the scent of wood smoke and mint in the air, it feels different. "Historians still argue," the old man says softly, "whether Mansa Musa's wealth was exaggerated, or if gold was truly that plentiful in Mali. But I think," he smiles, "the desert doesn't lie. It gives nothing easily." He laughs then, a deep, sand-dry sound, and adds a curious tidbit, that some of the caravan guides claimed to have seen golden fish in hidden desert lakes, believing them to be spirits guarding buried treasure. You decide not to ask if that's true. When morning comes, the air is clear and sharp. The dunes seem to shimmer more brightly than before, as though the sun itself approves of your progress. You leave the oasis behind, following the caravan southward. Days blur together. The rhythm of travel becomes trance-like. Steps, breaths, silence, wind. You begin to understand why traders call the Sahara the ocean without water. You're sailing it now, one slow ripple at a time. Eventually, the dunes soften into flat reddish plains. You begin to see trees again, acacia, baobab. The air smells faintly of earth and grass. The heat remains, but it's gentler. Then, in the distance, you spot walls, mud brick walls glowing amber in the sun. Timbuktu. It feels unreal at first, like a mirage made of architecture. But the city grows clearer with every step. Pointed minarets, low roofs, narrow streets winding like dried riverbeds. It's quieter than you expected. Not a roaring marketplace, but a steady hum of activity. Timbuktu isn't just a trading hub. It's a place of books, learning, and light. You walk past libraries where manuscripts are stacked high, centuries of wisdom inked on delicate pages. Scholars debate in courtyards, their voices calm and precise. One greets you kindly and gestures toward a clay building with tall wooden stakes jutting from its walls. The Sankore Mosque, he says, a university before Europe dreamed of such things. You wander through it, marveling at the cool air inside. The scent of old paper and ink fills the space. Students sit cross-legged, reciting verses in Arabic. A teacher's voice rises, low and melodic, explaining astronomy and law. You realize that trade here doesn't just carry salt and gold, it carries ideas. In the marketplace outside, the sounds return. Traders bargaining over ivory and leather, the clatter of brass bowls, the bleating of goats. Somewhere, a musician plucks a kora, a stringed instrument whose notes shimmer like sunlight on water. The melody drifts through the air, slow and dreamlike. You pause beside a merchant selling gold dust in tiny leather pouches. He sprinkles a few grains into your palm. They glimmer faintly in the sun, almost unreal. You imagine the journey they've taken, from forest rivers to desert dunes, from miners' hands to yours. Do you ever tire of it, you ask? The merchant smiles. Tire of the desert? Never. The desert teaches patience. The dunes move, but the trade remains. You nod, feeling the truth in his words. That night, as you rest on the city's edge, you look out over the sand one last time. The moon hangs low, casting pale silver light across the dunes. Somewhere out there, another caravan is setting off, its bells faint, its path invisible. You listen until the sound fades completely, replaced by the slow hum of night insects and the whisper of wind against the walls. The Sahara is vast, eternal, and strangely peaceful. You think of the salt you carried, the gold you saw, and the countless footsteps that have crossed this same path. Empires rise and vanish, yet the trade routes endure, like veins through the body of the world, pulsing softly with the lifeblood of connection. You close your eyes. The sand sighs, the stars shimmer, and for a long, quiet moment, the whole desert feels like it's breathing with you. The desert fades behind you, replaced by a vast expanse of grass stretching farther than your eyes can follow. You are in the Eurasian steppes now, where the wind moves in endless waves across tall, waving grasses. There are no dunes, no stones, just horizon, sky, and the distant glimmer of a caravan moving like a ripple across the land. You mount a horse offered by a local rider, the animal's back firm and steady beneath you. Unlike camels, the horse is alive with restless energy. Every movement carries a hint of flight, a subtle anticipation of speed. You can feel the pulse of the plains in its gait, the rhythm of centuries of nomadic life coursing beneath you. This is the land of the steppe, where traders and travelers rely not on roads or ports, but on memory and instinct. Silk, furs, and horses move in long lines here, each caravan bound for distant cities like Samarkand, Bukhara, or Chang'an. Historians still argue whether the steppes created the Silk Road or if the Silk Road simply adapted to them. Either way, the result is the same. The steppe is a highway of wind, dust, and endurance. The air smells faintly of horse sweat, dry grass, and firewood. In the distance, you see yurts, round, felt-covered homes that seem almost to float above the plains. Nomads move between them, herding sheep, goats, and horses. Their faces are wind-burned, their eyes steady and calm. You realize that life here is a balance of motion and patience, just like the trade that passes through. A merchant traveling with you opens a small bundle of goods. Spices from India, porcelain shards from China, dyed fabrics from Persia. He spreads them on a mat beside the horse, and you can see the variety of colors glinting in the sunlight. You pick up a piece of silk, soft, light, and strangely familiar, like a memory of your journey across the Indian Ocean. It's astonishing to consider that this thread has traveled thousands of miles, surviving heat, wind, sand, and time. The caravan moves steadily across the plains, and you notice the careful coordination required. Horses and riders fall into a rhythm that is almost musical, the sound of hooves and bells creating a steady, hypnotic pulse. You recall the slow swaying of camels across the Sahara, the creaking dhows in the Indian Ocean, and you realize that every trade route has its own cadence, its own heartbeat. By midday, the sun climbs high, the sky a relentless dome of blue. You stop at a small oasis marked by a cluster of poplar trees and a pond fed by a hidden spring. Water shimmers faintly in the pool, and the air smells sweet from the reeds. The traders dismount, and the horses lower their heads to drink, lips stirring ripples in the water. You dip your hands in, feeling the cool relief of life-giving water. Stories circulate around the oasis. One merchant tells of Chang'an, the great eastern terminus of the Silk Road. He describes the city as a palace of colors and noise, with markets so vast they seem endless, streets so crowded that you can barely walk without brushing against 1,000 strangers. Another tells of the northern forests, where furs are hunted and traded, each pelt a treasure bound for markets far away. You sip tea from a small pot someone has carried, the flavor earthy, slightly bitter, and comforting. The smell of smoke from a nearby fire curls toward you. Somewhere, a young boy laughs as he chases a goat around the yurt of a nomadic family. It's peaceful in a way that belies the vastness and unpredictability of the steppe. Traveling further, you pass low hills scattered with stones and the occasional grove of poplar or willow. The horizon seems endless. Sometimes you see ruins of old forts, crumbling walls that once guarded caravan routes and oasis towns. They are silent witnesses to centuries of commerce, warfare, and human ambition. Some claim they were fortified by the Parthians, others by early Persian dynasties. Historians still argue whether these ruins were primarily defensive or administrative. You shrug, imagining how the wind has erased most arguments. As evening falls, the sky blazes orange and pink. The horses slow, their energy waning with the heat of the day. Campfires flicker in the distance as other caravans pause for the night. You dismount, your legs stiff from hours in the saddle, and help arrange tents and bedding. The air grows cool, and you pull a blanket around your shoulders. Around the fire, the traders share food, dried meat, flatbread, and fruits pressed into dense, sweet cakes. You taste the cakes, thinking of the distant deserts, the ports, and the mountains you've crossed. Every morsel is a product of networks that stretch from ocean to ocean, desert to desert, steppe to steppe. You feel the weight of connection in your belly, and it's oddly comforting. At night, you lie on the ground beside your horse, gazing up at stars that seem impossibly close. The Milky Way stretches like a ribbon across the sky. You recognize a few constellations from your earlier travels, yet others are strange and new, reflecting the unfamiliar hemisphere. Somewhere in the distance, a bell rings faintly. Another caravan moving through the plains. The sound is reassuring, a reminder that this land is traversed daily, patiently, persistently. You imagine the Silk Road stretching across the horizon, bending to the will of wind, sand, and hoof. Silk from China will meet spices from India, furs from Siberia, gold from the West. Every item has a story, every transaction a trace of human ambition, curiosity, and patience. The steppes themselves become a kind of connector, a living, breathing path that holds civilizations together. When dawn comes, the plains shimmer with dew. The grass is swaying like gentle waves. You remount and continue westward, following the tracks of those who have traveled this way for centuries. You pass more yurts, more streams, more small communities that exist only because trade passes nearby. Each step carries history forward. The first city appears on the horizon, walls rising from the flat earth, spires glinting in the sun. Bukhara, perhaps, or Samarkand, two jewels along the Silk Road. The caravan quickens its pace, eager to reach the gates, to rest, to trade, to continue the endless rhythm of movement. You realize as you ride closer that the steppe is not empty. It is alive, not with trees or rivers, but with stories, motion, and history. Every hoofbeat, every exchange, every glance between merchants is part of a greater pulse. The Silk Road is not just a line on a map. It is a living artery of culture, commerce, and connection. You enter the city gates as the sun tilts toward the horizon, bathing the walls in gold. Traders call greetings, the scent of spices and smoke rises, and the streets are filled with the hum of human life. For now, you rest. Tomorrow, the journey continues, because the roads never truly end. They only pause until someone else walks them. The sprawl of Samarkand fades behind you as the caravan presses eastward, leaving the fertile plains and stepping into a world carved by stone and sky. The smooth grasslands give way to rising hills, then jagged mountains that pierce the horizon with sharp, frozen peaks. The air is cooler now, tinged with pine, wildflowers, and the faint metallic scent of distant rivers cutting through rock. You breathe deeply, feeling the weight of altitude in your chest, the pulse of history beneath each step. The camels and horses adjust with careful grace. Pack animals in the rear sway slightly, their ropes knotted with centuries of knowledge about balance and endurance. Traders move with ease despite the uneven terrain, scanning the horizon for safe paths, for passes hidden from sight, for streams that can sustain life. Mountains are not forgiving, but they are predictable in their own way. Weather, rock, and snow follow a rhythm you can learn if you pay attention. The caravan pauses at a small outpost built against a cliff face. A stream gurgles nearby, feeding a few scattered fruit trees. You take off your boots, dipping your feet in the clear water. The cold is a shock, but refreshing, a reminder that every environment has its own lessons. Here, the goods are repacked, wrapped, and balanced. Silk from China is stacked carefully to avoid wrinkles. Spices from India, already fragrant, are placed in woven baskets. Gold dust is double bagged, hidden beneath layers of fabric. You realize that trade through these mountains isn't just about endurance. It's about vigilance, trust, and quiet cunning. A young guy joins the caravan for the next leg, pointing to the passes that wind like ribbons between peaks. He gestures to a slope where the snow hasn't melted and whispers of a legend, that the spirits of travelers who perished here walk the ridge at night, keeping watch over the living. You shiver, partly from the cold, partly from the thought of countless traders who never saw the other side. Historians still argue whether these stories were warnings or just stories to instill respect for the mountain's power. Either way, they linger in your mind as you step carefully along the path. The climb is slow. Every step requires attention. Loose stones slide beneath your feet. The camels groan under the weight of their loads, and the horses' hooves clatter against rock. You hear the distant cry of an eagle circling high above the valley, a sentinel in a sky that seems endless. You pause on a ridge and look back. The plains below stretch far and wide, soft green fading into pale blue haze. You feel the same thrill you felt crossing the Sahara and the steppes, that sense of smallness in the face of vast, persistent geography. Trade has carried people across these landscapes for millennia, and here, in the silence of the mountains, you sense the magnitude of those journeys. At midday, the caravan reaches a small mountain village perched on a plateau. Mud brick houses cling to cliffs, their flat roofs lined with drying herbs and grains. Smoke spirals from chimneys. Children run barefoot through the narrow alleys laughing. Elderly men sit outside, carving wood or counting coins. You are struck by how life endures in such an unforgiving environment. The villagers trade freely with travelers. They offer dried fruit, salted cheese, and woolen cloth. You notice the locals know the terrain intimately, where the snowdrifts are deepest, which stream will not run dry, which cliffs hold shelter from wind. The mountains are a harsh tutor, but those who listen are rewarded. By afternoon, the caravan ascends a high pass. Snow gleams on the peaks, glittering like crushed diamonds in the sun. The air is thin, making every breath deliberate. You notice the layers of history along the way. Old cairns marking burial sites, fragments of pottery half buried in scree, and carved stone markers pointing toward distant settlements. Some are Roman, some Parthian, others lost to memory. Each seems to whisper, reminding you that these routes have been walked for thousands of years. The guide points out a narrow ridge path. One misstep, he says, and you are part of the mountain now. You glance at the sheer drop, feeling a mix of awe and terror. The camels edge along slowly, carefully, each step deliberate. You cling to the rhythm, focusing on balance, breath, and the gentle sway of the line. As evening falls, the temperature drops sharply. Fires are lit in small circles, and the traders huddle together for warmth. The wind whispers through the peaks, carrying stories from hundreds of miles east and west. Somewhere, a flute plays a slow melody, the notes rising and falling like the valleys themselves. You realize that music, like trade, has traveled along these routes, carried by hands, lips, and hearts for generations. During the night, you dream of the passes you've crossed, snow, rock, and wind, dotted with traders and animals, each carrying their precious cargo across the spine of the world. You see the glow of lanterns in distant valleys, imagine caravans threading through gorges, and feel the steady pulse of movement that has linked civilizations long before maps recorded them. At first light, the mountains take on a pale gold glow. You stand on a ridge, the valley opening before you, dotted with villages and terraced fields. Traders prepare to descend, adjusting loads and checking animals. The descent is slow but steady, each step a negotiation with gravity. As the caravan moves downward, you notice the subtle changes in flora. Pine gives way to wildflowers, streams grow wider, and the air carries a faint, sweet aroma from blossoming trees. You remember the desert, the steppes, the Mediterranean coasts. The mountain passes feel like a bridge between worlds, an essential link in the chain of trade routes that connect distant lands. Eventually, the mountains slope gently into rolling hills. You glimpse the first signs of cities again, walls, minarets, and bustling markets. The journey through stone and snow has been exacting, but it has prepared you for what lies ahead, the bustling cities of Central Asia, hubs where goods, ideas, and people converge. You pause on a hilltop to watch the sun lower behind the mountains. Shadows stretch across valleys, casting the caravan in long, delicate lines. The air is quiet now, save for the low murmur of voices and the soft clatter of hooves. You feel a sense of completion, knowing the mountains have been crossed, the paths followed, the trade sustained. The mountains may be dangerous, unpredictable, and imposing, but they are also life-giving. They funnel rivers, shelter villages, and channel commerce. They test the endurance of people and animals alike. And they remind you that every item carried, the silk, the spices, the gold, has a story that is inseparable from the land it traverses. As night falls over the foothills, you settle near the edge of a river that glints faintly in the moonlight. The caravan rests. Horses and camels lower their heads. You lie back, watching stars twinkle through the chill night air, thinking of all the hands that have guided goods across these same ridges for centuries. The mountains have been patient teachers, relentless but fair. You close your eyes, letting the whisper of wind through the peaks lull you into calm reflection. The Silk Road flows not just through valleys and passes, but through time itself, persistent, quiet, enduring. The mountains recede behind you, their jagged peaks softened into rolling hills, and the air grows warmer, richer, and filled with unfamiliar scents. You are finally approaching the eastern terminus of the long chain of trade routes, the markets of China, where silk, porcelain, tea, and countless other treasures await eager hands. The world has expanded before you for weeks across deserts, steppes, and mountains, and now, in this bustling eastern hub, it feels as though it has contracted into a single, vibrant heartbeat. You step into the outskirts of a city that could be Chang'an, the capital of the Tang Dynasty, a sprawling metropolis surrounded by walls so high they seem to scrape the sky. The streets are paved with stones worn smooth by countless travelers' feet. Lanterns hang along the thoroughfares, swinging gently in the breeze and casting warm, flickering light on the faces of merchants, scholars, and laborers alike. You immediately notice the smell: roasted grains, spices, ink, and fresh clay from kilns, mingling with the distant perfume of jasmine gardens. The city hums with motion. Horses and donkeys carry goods from distant provinces. Carts rattling with porcelain or silk weave through the streets. Street vendors call out, their voices rising and falling in a chaotic rhythm that somehow feels comforting. You follow a merchant through a crowded square, dodging a group of children playing a game with a hoop and stick, laughing as it rolls into your path. Silk dominates the market. Brightly colored bolts hang from wooden racks, shimmering in the sunlight. Some are patterned with intricate floral motifs. Others are embroidered with gold thread so fine it glints like sunlight on water. A trader nearby smooths a piece of deep crimson silk, describing how it comes from mulberry-fed silkworms carefully nurtured by artisans hundreds of miles away. You can feel the softness between your fingers, imagining the journey of this single thread, from worm to weaver, across mountains, deserts, and rivers, all the way to your hand. Porcelain is next. Bowls, plates, and vases, delicate and almost impossibly light, line tables in neat rows. The blue and white patterns depict landscapes, dragons, and calligraphy. You pick up a small vase, surprised by how solid yet fragile it feels. The artisan at the stall tells you that kilns have been firing these vessels for centuries, and that each piece carries the soul of the maker. You remember the amphorae of Rome, the clay jars of Palmyra, and notice the continuity of human care and craft across continents and eras. The market is not just about goods. It is about stories, ideas, and cultural exchange. A scholar at a low table unfurls maps, comparing Chinese cities with far-off lands. Travelers share tales of Indian spices, Persian textiles, and Arabian horses. You overhear a debate. Historians still argue whether the Silk Road truly began as a trade route for silk alone, or if it evolved from older networks of cultural and political exchange. The discussion drifts lazily through the stalls, unheard by most, but its presence reminds you that knowledge, like goods, has its own pathways. The city itself is alive with learning. You pass schools where children practice calligraphy, the ink-dark lines flowing smoothly across paper. Nearby, a temple offers incense and quiet reflection, its doors carved with intricate patterns that tell stories of gods, emperors, and ancestors. Somewhere, a bell tolls gently, marking the passage of time that seems slower here in the eastern markets than it ever did in the deserts or mountains. You pause beside a tea merchant. He pours a steaming cup from a porcelain pot, the fragrance delicate and calming. The tea is green, lightly smoked, with a subtle sweetness that lingers on your tongue. He explains that tea has been a vital trade item, carried westward along the Silk Road in chests bound with rope and silk. You sip, savoring the warmth and the knowledge that countless traders have shared this same ritual across centuries.
Nearby, a young boy sells small carved jade figures. You notice the artistry. Each figure, polished to a soft glow, seems to capture motion and emotion simultaneously. He explains that jade is considered more than decoration. It embodies virtue, immortality, and status. You nod, thinking of how trade carries not only material wealth, but symbols, beliefs, and values across great distances. As you wander further into the market, the scale of exchange becomes overwhelming. You see merchants negotiating in Arabic, Persian, Turkic, and Chinese. Gold coins glint in the sun. Exotic fruits from the south, spices from the west, and silk from local workshops blend in a riot of color, scent, and sound. A performer twirls brightly colored ribbons, attracting a crowd. You step aside, allowing the human tide to flow past and feel the pulse of commerce that drives this city. Even in such a bustling place, the journey is not without its peculiarities. A vendor nearby claims to sell powdered unicorn horn for healing purposes, a fringe tidbit that makes you chuckle. Scholars argue over its efficacy, but it doesn't stop traders from buying small vials. You remember similar oddities along other trade routes: golden fish in the desert, salt blocks shaped like coffins, and aromatic resins whispered to hold magical power. The world of trade seems always to accommodate a little mystery. By late afternoon, the shadows lengthen, and the market begins to shift. Goods are packed away, merchants tally accounts, animals are loaded for the next leg of their journey. You stand atop a low hill and look back at the city sprawling beneath you. Roads lead outward in every direction, some toward the Pacific, others west towards Central Asia, carrying the pulse of trade across the continents. You realize the Silk Road is more than a line on a map. It is a living network of human ambition, curiosity, and endurance. Silk from China meets spices from India, gold from Mali, and knowledge from scholars in every land along the way. Each item, each conversation, each step of a camel or horse is a thread in a tapestry woven over centuries. As night falls, lanterns dot the streets, glowing softly in clusters. The market quiets, replaced by the soft hum of the city at rest. Somewhere in a distant courtyard, a stringed instrument plays a gentle melody. You lean back against a wooden post, breathing in the mingled scents of earth, ink, and tea, feeling the rhythm of a world connected across thousands of miles. You close your eyes, imagining the caravans that will follow you, moving goods, ideas, and stories back across mountains, steppes, deserts, and seas. The journey never truly ends. It only changes direction, weaving the continuous pulse of trade that links civilizations together. The land fades beneath your feet, replaced by the vast, undulating expanse of the Indian Ocean. The scent of salt and the tang of brine fill your nose. You stand at the edge of a harbor where dhows and junks rock gently against wooden piers, their sails slack in the calm breeze.
Trade has shifted from camel and horse to boat and tide, and the rhythm here is entirely different, slower in a way, guided by currents, monsoons, and stars. You step onto a deck, the wood warm under your hands, and watch sailors preparing for departure. The vessels are simple but sturdy, designed to carry heavy cargo over long distances. You notice the distinctive triangular lateen sails, catching the wind at an angle, and the careful knots securing barrels and crates. The ship smells of tar, wet rope, and spices, cloves, cinnamon, cardamom, all mingling into an intoxicating perfume. The dhow rocks gently as you take your place among the crew and traders. Crates of Chinese porcelain, bolts of silk from the eastern markets, pepper from India, and exotic woods from the Malay archipelago are loaded below deck. Barrels of wine, dates, and preserved fish are stacked along the sides. The captain, a wiry man with eyes like dark amber, gives brief orders in a language you can barely follow, but the meaning is clear. Wind, tide, and timing are everything. As the vessel slips away from the harbor, the city behind you shrinks into the distance. Lanterns flicker in the early morning haze, and the cries of seagulls fade into the hum of sails. You feel the ocean's pulse, a slow, steady heartbeat, different from the rhythm of the desert or the plains, but just as vital. The voyage is long. Days stretch like threads of gold and blue, each marked by the sun's climb and fall. Nights bring stars so bright that you can almost read a book by their light. Sailors and traders gather on deck, sharing stories of ports they visited. Keelan, Calicut, Hormuz, Mogadishu, Malacca, names that sound like music across tongues. They speak of storms survived, pirates eluded, and goods delivered across thousands of miles of open water. Historians still argue whether these routes existed primarily for commerce or were driven equally by migration, diplomacy, and exploration. You let the ambiguity linger, enjoying the softness of the uncertainty. The monsoon wind carries you steadily east or west, depending on the season. You notice the clever use of celestial navigation, the North Star, the Southern Cross, the angle of the sun at noon, all guiding ships across a seemingly endless ocean. At night, the water reflects starlight in a way that makes the sea feel like a liquid galaxy, stretching infinitely around the vessel. You lie back, listening to the creak of wood, the slap of waves, and the occasional call of a distant sailor, and you feel the lull of movement, a hypnotic rhythm that makes the mind wander. You pass islands scattered across the waves, each with its own personality. Some are small, rocky outcrops where birds nest and coconut palms sway in the wind. Others are larger, with sandy shores and trading settlements where spices, timber, and gold are exchanged for cloth, beads, and porcelain. Each stop is a microcosm of the larger trade network, a small hub where cultures meet, mingle, and create new stories. One afternoon, you watch as a small boat approaches from the shore. Traders come aboard carrying crates of cinnamon and nutmeg, their skin darkened by the tropical sun. You notice the meticulous labeling, the woven palm leaves protecting fragile goods, and the careful accounting of weight and quantity. You smile, remembering the camel caravans in the desert, the horse lines across the steppe, and realize that regardless of land or sea, the principles of trade, trust, care, and diligence remain unchanged. That some ships carried live peacocks, meant as exotic gifts for distant rulers. You laugh softly, imagining the chaos on deck. Historians still argue whether peacocks were transported more often for status displays or religious rituals, but the idea of the vibrant, flapping birds amid sacks of pepper and silk makes you grin. As the voyage continues, you learn to read the ocean's moods. Darkening clouds signal squalls, while the swell of waves hints at distant storms. You watch pods of dolphins racing alongside the dhow, riding the bow waves as if escorting the ship across invisible lanes of travel. The nights are filled with phosphorescent trails left by small fish, glowing like fireflies beneath the water. It is hypnotic, otherworldly, and utterly calming. Food aboard the vessel is simple but sustaining. Rice, dried fish, dates, and preserved fruits make up most meals, though occasionally a generous trader will bring fresh fish from a stopover. You notice that sharing food is as important as sharing knowledge, each meal reinforcing bonds that make trade possible. Some traders speak softly of distant markets they've never visited. Others boast of successful negotiations, and some simply sit in quiet reflection, gazing at the endless expanse of water. The dhow eventually reaches a port city, perhaps Calicut or Malacca, where the shoreline is dotted with other vessels, flags fluttering in the breeze. Merchants from Arabia, India, China, and the islands all converge, carrying goods, stories, and news. You step onto the dock, feeling the solid earth beneath your feet after so many days at sea, and notice the cacophony of smells and sounds: shouting vendors, braying animals, the creak of wood against wood, and the sweet tang of tropical spices. Here, trade is a festival. You watch the unloading of goods: sacks of rice, crates of spices, jars of oil, textiles, and precious metals. Traders haggle in multiple languages, sometimes with gestures alone. The market is a mosaic of cultures, each contributing to the rhythm of commerce. You realize that maritime routes don't just carry goods, they carry knowledge, customs, beliefs, and innovations. At night, the port quiets, lanterns reflecting on the water. You lie on the dock, listening to the soft lapping of waves against hulls, feeling the scent of salt and tar on your skin. Somewhere, a sailor hums a gentle tune, the melody drifting into the night air. The ocean has a way of softening everything, the sharp edges of distance, fatigue, and worry, into a slow, comforting cadence. You close your eyes and imagine the journey continuing across open water, winds shifting, sails catching, cargo traveling thousands of miles. From desert dunes to mountain passes, steppe plains to river cities, and finally to the ocean, the flow of trade connects every part of the world. The rhythm of movement, persistent, patient, and enduring, remains, and you feel a deep sense of calm in its consistency. Even as you drift into a light sleep, the distant calls of seagulls, the gentle rocking of the ship, and the faint aroma of spices remind you that commerce, culture, and human ingenuity are inseparable. The Indian Ocean is vast, mysterious, and generous, just like the trade it carries. And for a moment, you feel at home in its endless expanse. After weeks at sea, the dhow docks at a bustling Mediterranean port, where the scent of salt mingles with herbs, olives, and freshly baked bread. You step onto sun-warmed stone piers, feeling the contrast between the rocking motion of the ocean and the solid, grounded rhythm of the city. Trade here has a different character, anchored in bustling harbors, lively markets, and centuries of interwoven civilizations. You wander through the harbor, observing ships of every size: Greek triremes, Roman-style cargo vessels, and smaller fishing boats. Each is laden with goods from distant lands: wine from the Levant, olive oil from Italy, glass from Phoenicia, spices from the East, and ivory and gold arriving via the Indian Ocean. Merchants call out in a dozen languages: Greek, Latin, Phoenician, and more, bargaining, teasing, and laughing. You trudge along with them, feeling the pulse of commerce beneath your feet, the heartbeat of history in every shout and gesture. The Mediterranean has always been a crossroads, a meeting point for cultures and ideas. Ships crisscross the sea in predictable rhythms, guided by winds, currents, and centuries of experience. You notice the clever use of sails and oars, the way experienced captains read the waves and the stars alike. Trade here relies on both skill and timing. A single miscalculation could mean missing the tide, losing cargo, or worse. Historians still argue whether Mediterranean trade routes thrived primarily because of technology or because of cultural and political networks? You shrug, letting the ambiguity float over you like the soft salt breeze. You pass through markets near the harbor. Stalls overflow with goods. Copper cookware gleams in the sun. Embroidered textiles flutter in the breeze. Amphorae of wine are stacked high, and crates of dried fish line narrow alleys. You remember the ports of the Indian Ocean, with their dhows and exotic spices, and realize that while the goods differ, the principles remain the same. Careful packing, trust among traders, and patience. A vendor hands you a small ceramic cup filled with fragrant oil, he says, winking. You chuckle at the superstition, but accept the gift, thinking of similar practices along other routes. Peacocks on dhows, golden fish in desert lakes, or salt carved into miniature coffins. These quirks remind you that trade is as much about human imagination as it is about material exchange. You walk along narrow streets, the stone walls warm under your palms. You notice mosaics embedded in the pavement, remnants of older civilizations, each telling stories of trade, conquest, and everyday life. They are faded now, but still vibrant enough to spark the imagination. A merchant with a camel, a fisherman casting a net, a scholar reading scrolls. The past and present seem to merge here, as if every step you take echoes centuries of human endeavor. Ships begin to unload their cargo, and the market fills with motion. Sailors drag barrels of olive oil, crates of figs, and jars of honey, while merchants haggle over textiles, beads, and glassware. You watch a negotiation between two traders, one from Alexandria, the other from Carthage. The discussion is lively but civil, full of gestures and laughter. The human connection is as essential as the goods themselves. You follow the traders to a wine market, where amphorae of red and white glisten in the afternoon sun. You lift a vessel, feeling the weight of fermented labor inside. Someone mentions that ancient Mediterranean wine could travel for months without spoiling if properly stored in sealed amphorae, a testament to the ingenuity of traders. You sip a drop of wine offered by the vendor, tasting centuries of effort and skill concentrated into a single flavor. Nearby, glassmakers demonstrate their craft, blowing molten glass into delicate vases and beads. You watch the artisans work with patient precision, their hands steady, their eyes focused. It strikes you that trade routes don't only carry finished goods, they carry techniques, traditions, and skills that transform cultures over time. As evening approaches, the sun lowers over the water, casting gold and rose across the harbor. Lanterns flicker to life, their warm glow reflected in the rippling surface. Traders begin packing up, boats are secured, and the market quiets to a gentle hum. You pause on the pier, looking out across the water toward distant lands. Ships await departure, ready to continue their journey east or west, linking ports and people across thousands of miles. The Mediterranean is a bridge between worlds, connecting Africa, Europe, and Asia. Goods, ideas, and cultures flow in every direction. You remember the camels across the Sahara, the horses on the steppes, the dhows on the Indian Ocean, and see how all these networks converge here in this timeless space. The sea hums softly, a lullaby for the countless traders who have passed this way, carrying not only wealth, but human stories, traditions, and curiosity. Night settles, and the harbor grows quiet. The smell of salt and pine mingles with the aroma of baked bread from nearby ovens. A few lanterns sway, casting pools of light along the docks. You sit on a bench, feeling the steady pulse of history, the rhythm of commerce that has persisted for centuries. You think of all the routes you've crossed, the deserts, mountains, plains, oceans, and cities, and marvel at the enduring persistence of human connection. As you lean back, the gentle lapping of waves against the pier, the soft calls of night birds, and the faint chatter of late-night merchants combine into a soothing cadence. Trade, movement, and human endeavor form a pattern that stretches across the continents, a rhythm you can feel in your chest. You close your eyes and imagine caravans, ships, and traders moving through time, linking people and places in a dance older than most empires. After weeks, months, or perhaps just what feels like an eternity of traveling across deserts, steppes, mountains, rivers, and seas, you finally allow yourself a long, slow exhale. You sit atop a gentle hill overlooking a river delta where trade converges again, a meeting point of goods, ideas, and people from every corner of the world you've traversed. The water sparkles faintly in the afternoon sun, carrying tiny reflections of distant ports, desert caravans, and mountain passes. You feel as though you've been tracing invisible threads that stitch the globe together. The goods you've witnessed, the salt blocks of the Sahara, gold dust from Mali, silks from China, spices from India, amphorae from the Mediterranean, are not merely objects. They are vessels of connection, carriers of culture and knowledge. Each item carries stories of miners, farmers, artisans, sailors, and traders who dedicated their lives to the patient task of moving resources across vast distances. And now, sitting here, you can feel the enormity of that human endeavor. The countless footsteps, oar strokes, hoofbeats, and hands that have shaped history quietly, deliberately, persistently. You notice the river below, bustling with small boats carrying grain, textiles, and pottery to cities just beyond the horizon. Merchants shout in dozens of languages, their voices blending into a symphony of human activity. You realize that the global web of trade you've been following is endless. It never truly stops. There are always new goods to move, new ideas to exchange, new alliances to form. You remember the camel trains in the Sahara, the horses across Central Asia, the dhows on the Indian Ocean, and the merchant stalls in the Mediterranean. All of them are part of the same living system, interconnected, adaptive, resilient. The wind carries the scent of salt and soil, mixed with faint hints of spices and herbs from nearby markets. You close your eyes and imagine all the places you've crossed. The Sahara's shimmering dunes, the endless grasses of the steppes, the treacherous mountain passes, the bustling ports of the Indian Ocean, and the grand Mediterranean harbors. Each landscape has shaped the trade that passes through it, forcing ingenuity, endurance, and cultural exchange. Historians still argue whether these routes primarily spread goods or ideas first, but as you sit here, it seems clear they did both, simultaneously, in a way that transformed civilizations. A small boat drifts past on the river, its hull loaded with grain, fruit, and pottery. A child waves from the deck, laughing as the boat rocks gently. You wave back, smiling. It's easy to imagine that 1,000 years ago, someone in the same place, with different clothing and a different tongue, waved just as happily at another passing vessel. The human continuity is comforting. You see yourself as a small part of a vast, ongoing story, yet connected to it in a tangible, almost tactile way. The sun begins to dip, casting long shadows across the delta. The light turns soft, golden, and forgiving. You lean back, letting your mind wander over the journeys you've witnessed. The tireless caravans across scorching deserts, the careful caravans along snowy ridges, the patient sailors navigating monsoon winds, and the vibrant marketplaces alive with shouting merchants and laughing children. Each journey is unique, yet every path shares a rhythm of human perseverance, creativity, and curiosity. As the evening deepens, the air cools, carrying the faint scent of earth and water. The soft lapping of the river, the distant murmur of a market winding down, and the rustle of reeds in the wind create a soothing symphony. You notice how trade, in all its forms, has always relied on rhythm, steady, patient, and enduring. You begin to imagine the small, quiet victories hidden in this web. a carefully balanced load of salt delivered safely, a fragile piece of porcelain surviving weeks at sea, a contract signed in ink centuries ago still influencing commerce today. The world you've traveled through feels both immense and intimate, a network of countless connections that have made humanity resilient and resourceful. You realize that while the specifics of trade have changed over the centuries, ships now steam across oceans faster, railways crisscross continents, and air freight carries goods in hours instead of months, the fundamental principles endure. People continue to rely on trust, skill, and patience to bridge distances, just as they always have. As night falls, the delta darkens, and lanterns begin to flicker along the riverbanks. You lie back on the gentle slope, the grass soft beneath you, and allow the day's adventures to settle into memory. You think of the camels, the horses, the sailors, the merchants, and the scholars. Every one of them left a trace, a story, a skill, a lesson that continues to ripple across time. The stars emerge in the sky above, familiar and comforting. You trace constellations you recognized in the desert, the steppe, the mountains, and over the ocean. They are unchanged, ancient witnesses to centuries of movement, commerce, and exchange. You feel small, yes, but connected, part of a vast, ongoing tapestry of human endeavor. Slowly, you allow your breathing to match the rhythm of the delta, gentle, consistent, and calm. The world feels balanced, alive, yet quieting as night deepens. You feel gratitude for the journeys, the discoveries, the patterns you've traced, and the gentle hum of civilization that has persisted against wind, wave, and time. As your thoughts soften, so does the imagery. The river, the distant cities, the caravan trails, and the ocean waves fade into a soft glow. Your eyelids grow heavy. The sounds of trade, though distant now, linger as a comforting lullaby, a reminder of human resilience and connection. Take a moment to imagine the threads of trade gently weaving through time and space, linking you to distant lands and people, past and present. The rhythm slows. You drift. You breathe. You are part of this enduring, patient, vast, and astonishing story. And with that thought, the world quiets completely. Now, let the journey rest. Imagine yourself lying beneath a vast sky, soft and unending, where stars twinkle like distant lanterns along the paths you've traveled. Feel the gentle pulse of the earth beneath you, the subtle hum of rivers and wind, the quiet movement of people, animals, and ideas that has persisted for centuries. The heat of deserts, the sway of camels, the whistle of mountain winds, the rocking of ships, all fade into a gentle rhythm, lulling you deeper into calm. Picture the world as a network of quiet, patient connections, marketplaces, ports, caravans, and trade routes that stretch across continents. Each thread is a story, a journey, a heartbeat. Let yourself follow them slowly, imagining silk flowing from China, gold traveling from Africa, spices moving from India, and knowledge and ideas floating along with them. Every step, every wave, every hoofbeat carries humanity forward, steady and enduring. Your body relaxes. The tension of travel, of adventure, of thought releases with each breath. The sounds of civilization, the distant call of merchants, the gentle lapping of waves, the whisper of wind through grass fade into a soft, reassuring hum. You are suspended in time, held in the quiet majesty of human persistence and connection. Let the imagery dissolve into darkness. The river of trade, the desert, the mountains, and the seas retreat into memory, leaving only calm. Your mind drifts, slow and steady. You feel safe, held in the rhythm of centuries. The world, vast and intricate, hums softly, and you are part of it. Sleep now, enveloped in history, carried gently along the currents of time. End of script. Sweet dreams.